My name's Mark, I'm 42, and my wife, Ashley, is 39. We've been married for 12 years, and for most of that time, I thought we had a solid partnership. We met at a mutual friend's party. She was funny, confident, and had this fiery personality that drew people in. I fell for her hard and fast, and it wasn't long before we tied the knot. Things were good, at least at first. We built a life together, bought a house, and even started a small business together. A coffee shop downtown that quickly became a local favorite. But somewhere along the way, Ashley changed. First, I chalked it up to stress. She'd been pulling long hours at the shop, claiming she wanted to expand the menu and bring in more customers. But her attitude shifted. She was snappier, more impatient, and quick to pick fights over the smallest things. The real red flags started about 6 months ago. Ashley began spending more and more time running errands or meeting with vendors. She'd get home late, brushing off my questions with vague excuses. Her phone became an extension of her hand, and she'd get visibly irritated if I even glanced in its direction. I tried to convince myself it was all in my head, that I was being paranoid. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. It wasn't until last week that I stumbled upon the proof I'd been dreading. And let me tell you, what I found changed everything. Last week, Ashley left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went upstairs to grab her purse. It was rare for her to be more than 2 feet away from that thing, so I felt the opportunity glaring at me like a neon sign. At first, I hesitated. I hated the idea of snooping. I didn't want to be that guy. But the nagging feeling that something was off had been eating away at me for months, and I couldn't ignore it anymore. My gut told me this wasn't just in my head. I picked up her phone, heart pounding, and hit the home button. It was locked, but not with a passcode I hadn't seen her use before. My hands were shaking as I typed in the code. 0726, her birth date. The screen unlocked. My stomach sank when I opened her messages and found a thread with someone saved as Tina from yoga. Tina? Ashley doesn't even do yoga. The messages hit me like a sledgehammer. Tina from yoga. Last night was incredible. I can still feel your nails on my back. Smirking face. Ashley. You bring out a side of me Mark never could. I can't stop thinking about you. Tina from yoga. We need another getaway soon. How about next weekend? Ashley. I'll make it work. Mark's so clueless. He'd never suspect a thing. Red heart. My blood ran cold. Getaway? My mind raced as I remembered last month when Ashley had gone to a weekend business conference in Chicago. Before I could read further, I heard her footsteps coming down the stairs. I locked the phone and set it back down just in time. Ready to go? She asked, breezing into the room like nothing was wrong. I nodded, plastering on a fake smile while my heart hammered in my chest. That night I couldn't sleep. My mind was a storm of emotions. Betrayal, anger, sadness, disbelief. But one thing was clear, I wasn't going to let this slide. The next day, while Ashley was at the shop, I went through her laptop. If she'd been careless enough to leave her phone unlocked, I figured she might have slipped up elsewhere. Sure enough, her email was full of receipts for hotel bookings, dinner reservations, and even lingerie she'd never worn for me. One receipt caught my attention. A charge for a spa weekend at a resort 3 hours away. The dates matched up with her Chicago business conference. Then I found the cherry on top, a photo attached to one of the emails. It was Ashley, grinning ear to ear, with her arm draped around a guy I didn't recognize. They were standing on a balcony overlooking the resort, her hand on his chest like they were posing for a damn honeymoon picture. I stared at that photo for what felt like hours, the anger bubbling up inside me until it was almost unbearable. I knew then and there that I couldn't just confront her. I needed a plan to make her feel even a fraction of the pain she'd caused me. I spent the next 2 days pretending everything was normal, all the while plotting my next move. Ashley, oblivious as ever, continued with her daily routine, texting Tina from yoga, flashing me half-hearted smiles, and acting like she hadn't just detonated our marriage behind my back. But I wasn't going to confront her yet. Not until I had everything in place. I wanted her to feel cornered, exposed, and utterly powerless. It started with a dinner. Fancy one. Let's have a date night, I told her, feigning enthusiasm. We've both been so busy, and I feel like we haven't connected in a while. She hesitated for a split second, but then she nodded. Yeah, that sounds nice. That evening, I booked a table at her favorite steakhouse, the one where we'd celebrated our anniversaries in the past. I even wore the navy blazer she always said brought out my eyes. Ashley showed up looking stunning, as usual, dressed in a sleek black dress and wearing the diamond necklace I'd bought her for our 5th anniversary. For a moment, I felt a pang of the love I used to feel for her, but it was quickly smothered by the memory of those texts and that smug smile in the photo. Dinner started off pleasantly enough. We laughed, shared stories about the shop, and talked about random things. I could tell she was relaxing, probably thinking she'd gotten away with it. Once dessert arrived, I decided it was time to drop the hammer. You know, I said, swirling my glass of wine, I've been thinking about us lately, about our marriage. Ashley smiled. Yeah? What about it? I just want to make sure we're being honest with each other, I said, watching her carefully. Her smile faltered, but she recovered quickly. Of course we are. Why would you say that? I leaned forward, lowering my voice. Because I know about Tina from yoga. Her face went pale so fast it was almost comical. What? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I pulled out my phone and opened the photo from the email, the one of her and her mystery man on the resort balcony. I slid it across the table toward her. I know everything, Ashley. The texts, the hotels, the lies. So, tell me, how long has this been going on? Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. I don't. It's not what it looks like. Don't insult me. I interrupted, my voice cold. Just tell me the truth. Who is he? She sat back, crossing her arms defensively. Fine, she said, her tone suddenly sharp. His name's Jason. And yeah, we've been seeing each other. But it's not like you think. You've been so distant, Mark. Always focused on the shop or your hobbies. I needed someone who actually saw me. I laughed bitterly. So it's my fault? That's rich, Ashley. You had a problem with our marriage? And instead of talking to me, you decided to screw around with Jason. I didn't plan for this to happen, she said, tears welling in her eyes. It happened.
I'm sorry. Sorry,
I said, my voice rising. You're sorry because you got caught, not because of what you did. Don't you dare try to spin this into some kind of sob story. She stared at me, her tears now streaming down her cheeks. But I wasn't moved. Not anymore. This isn't over, I said, standing up. Not by a long shot. I paid the bill and left her sitting there, stunned and speechless. My plan was just beginning. After that night, Ashley started acting differently. She tiptoed around me, trying to make amends in small, superficial ways. Cooking my favorite meals, texting me cute memes, and pretending nothing had happened. It was pathetic, really, but I wasn't about to let her off the hook. Over the next week, I started laying the groundwork for what would be the perfect revenge. It wasn't enough for Ashley to feel guilty. I wanted her to experience the full weight of her betrayal. I wanted her to squirm, to regret, to pay. First, I went to a lawyer. I explained everything. The texts, the photos, the money she'd siphoned from our joint account to fund her little escapades with Jason. The lawyer was thorough and reassuring, outlining a strategy to protect my assets and make the divorce as airtight as possible. Next, I started collecting evidence. I downloaded every incriminating text, email, and photo from her devices and backed them up on a secure drive. I even found a receipt for a luxury watch she'd bought for Jason, paid for with my money. But the piece de resistance came when I hired a private investigator. It was expensive, sure, but worth every penny. Within days, the PI handed me a dossier of photos and videos of Ashley and Jason together. Sneaking kisses at a park, having lunch at a cozy cafe, and even checking into a motel. The best part? The investigator discovered that Jason wasn't exactly the Prince Charming Ashley thought he was. He was married, too, with 3 kids. When I found out Jason's wife's name, Catherine, I knew I had my next move. I reached out to her on social media, keeping my message polite but direct.
Y Katarina, y Mark.
I know this is out of the blue, but I believe your husband Jason is involved with my wife, Ashley. I have evidence and thought you deserved to know the truth. Let me know if you'd like to talk. She replied within hours. Mark, I've had suspicions for months. Please, tell me everything. I called her that evening, and we spent nearly an hour comparing notes. Catherine was furious but composed, determined to protect her children from Jason's betrayal. She thanked me for reaching out and assured me she'd handle things on her end. By the way, she said before hanging up, Jason and Ashley are meeting tomorrow night at the Regal Inn. You might want to be there. The next day, I called Ashley from work, doing my best to sound casual. Hey babe, I'll be working late tonight, so don't wait up for me. Okay? Oh, she said, a hint of hesitation in her voice. Sure. No problem. It was almost too easy. That evening, I parked across the street from the Regal Inn and waited. Sure enough, Ashley's car pulled in about 15 minutes later. I watched as she stepped out, glancing around nervously before disappearing into room 204. My hands tightened on the steering wheel, but I didn't follow her. Not yet. I had a better plan. I texted Catherine. There at the Regal Inn, room 204. Are you ready? Her reply came instantly. On my way. And then, just for good measure, I called the private investigator and asked him to meet me there with his camera. By the time Catherine arrived, I was standing outside room 204, the PI discreetly snapping photos from a distance. Catherine walked up to me, her face a mask of fury. Let's do this, she said, her voice cold as ice. I nodded and knocked on the door. Housekeeping, I called, barely suppressing a smirk. It only took a few seconds for Jason to open the door, his shirt half-buttoned. His eyes went wide when he saw Catherine and me standing there. What the hell is this? Catherine spat, pushing past him into the room. Ashley appeared from the bathroom, her face draining of color as she took in the scene. Mark? What are you? I think you both know exactly what this is, I said, my voice calm but laced with venom. As Catherine lit into Jason, calling him every name in the book, I turned to Ashley. You wanted excitement, Ashley? I said, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Well, here it is. Hope it was worth it. She tried to stammer out an excuse, but I didn't wait to hear it. I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving her to deal with the chaos she'd created. My revenge wasn't complete yet, but the look on her face as I walked away was a good start. I didn't go straight home after leaving the Regal Inn. Instead, I went to a nearby bar and ordered a drink, letting the events of the night sink in. Seeing Ashley's face when she realized the jig was up? Priceless. Watching Catherine tear into Jason like a woman possessed? Even better. But this was just the beginning. When I finally got home, Ashley's car was already in the driveway. I took a deep breath and walked inside, half expecting her to launch into some excuse-filled tirade. Instead, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring blankly at her phone. Mark, she said quietly, her voice hoarse. Save it, I said, dropping my keys on the counter. I don't want to hear whatever bullshit story you've come up with. She flinched but didn't argue. What are you going to do? Oh, I've already started, I said, grabbing a beer from the fridge. Filed for divorce. Talked to a lawyer. Oh, and I've got a mountain of evidence thanks to you. So don't worry, Ashley. You'll be hearing from me soon. Her eyes widened, panic flickering across her face. Mark, please, can't we just talk about this? I made a mistake, but we can fix this. No, I snapped, cutting her off. We can't. You didn't just make a mistake, Ashley. You lied. You cheated. You spent our money on him. There's nothing to fix. Tears streamed down her cheeks, but I didn't feel a shred of sympathy. I'll fight for this, Mark, she said, her voice trembling. I won't let you ruin my life. I laughed bitterly. Your life? Ashley, you already ruined it. I'm just cleaning up the mess. The next day, things escalated. Catherine, true to her word, wasn't letting Jason off the hook. She'd kicked him out of their house and started divorce proceedings of her own. But she didn't stop there. She went public. Catherine posted about the affair on social media, complete with photos of Jason and Ashley at the motel. She didn't name names, but anyone who knew them could put two and two together. The post went viral in our local community, and soon the whispers started. By the end of the week, customers at the coffee shop were giving Ashley side-eye, and a few even asked if the rumors were true. She tried to play it off, but her facade was cracking. "Are you behind this?" she hissed at me one night after the kids were asleep. "Nope," I said, smirking. "But I have to admit, it's satisfying to watch you squirm." "You're a monster," she spat, her voice shaking with anger. "No, Ashley," I said, my voice calm. "I'm just someone who refuses to let you get away with what you've done." Then came the final blow. The private investigator had recorded everything from the motel confrontation. Photos, audio, even a short video clip of Ashley trying to justify her actions. With my lawyer's help, I sent the evidence to her parents. That might sound harsh, but her parents had always thought Ashley walked on water, constantly comparing me to her like I was the one who wasn't good enough. I figured it was time they saw their perfect daughter for who she really was. The fallout was immediate. Her mother called me, sobbing and apologizing on Ashley's behalf. Her father, on the other hand, was furious at both of us. "This is a family matter," he growled. "You shouldn't have involved us." "Maybe," I said, shrugging. "But your daughter didn't just destroy a family. She destroyed mine." Ashley's world was crumbling, and I could see the strain in her every move. But I wasn't done yet. I still had one more card to play. The business. The coffee shop we'd built together was technically a joint venture, but I was the one who'd put in most of the capital to start it. My lawyer confirmed that I had every right to demand a buyout or force a sale during the divorce proceedings. I knew how much the shop meant to Ashley. It was her pride and joy. Taking it from her wouldn't just hurt her financially. It would break her spirit. But I wasn't ready to pull that trigger yet. Not until I saw how far she'd go to save herself. The tension in the house had become unbearable. Ashley tried to act normal around the kids, but it was clear she was barely holding it together. Meanwhile, I kept things civil for their sake, but every interaction with her felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I was done pretending, though. It was time to make my next move. My lawyer had drawn up the paperwork for the coffee shop. Since I was the majority investor, I had two options. Force Ashley to buy out my share at a price I dictated or demand the shop be sold and split the proceeds. Neither option was ideal for her, and she knew it. One evening, after the kids were in bed, I dropped the papers in front of her at the kitchen table. "What's this?" she asked, her voice already trembling. "It's the next step," I said, crossing my arms. "You're going to sell the shop, or buy me out." Her eyes darted over the documents, her expression shifting from confusion to panic. "Mark, you can't do this. The shop is everything to me." "Oh, I know," I said with a smirk. "But you should have thought about that before you used it as your excuse to sneak around with Jason." "I'll fight this," she snapped, pushing the papers away. "Go ahead," I said. "But good luck finding a lawyer who can argue against financial records. The shop's ownership is clear, Ashley. You'll lose." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. The next day, Ashley tried to play hardball. She called in one of her friends, a self-proclaimed business consultant, to try to negotiate a deal. It was laughable. "This shop is as much hers as it is yours," her friend argued. "You're being vindictive, Mark." "No," I said calmly. "I'm being fair. Ashley can keep the shop, if she can afford to buy me out. If not, it gets sold. Simple as that." Ashley sat silently, her arms crossed and her jaw clenched. I could tell she wanted to scream, but she also knew she was out of options. A week later, she caved. "I'll buy you out," she said, her voice hollow. "Good choice," I said, handing her the finalized paperwork. But even as she signed, I could see the weight of her decision crushing her. She was barely scraping by after everything that had happened, and buying me out meant taking on a hefty loan. As she handed the papers back to me, her hand trembled. I hope you're happy, she said bitterly. I'll be happy when this is all over, I replied coldly. With the shop officially out of my life, I felt a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. It wasn't just about the money. It was about taking back control, about making Ashley realize that her actions had consequences. But I wasn't finished yet. There was still one more piece of the puzzle. Jason. That night, I sent an anonymous tip to Jason's employer, complete with copies of the photos and texts I'd gathered. Jason worked for a family-owned real estate firm, one that prided itself on its traditional values. By the end of the week, Jason was out of a job. Ashley found out, of course. She confronted me in a rare moment of anger. "You're ruining people's lives," she yelled. "Funny?" I said, leaning back in my chair. "That's exactly what you did to me, to us. I'm just leveling the playing field." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. With the shop gone and Jason out of her life, Ashley was left scrambling. She started selling off her belongings to stay afloat, including the jewelry and expensive gifts Jason had bought her. The irony wasn't lost on me. Every step of her downfall felt like justice. And yet, as satisfying as it was to see her crumble, I couldn't help but feel a twinge of sadness for what we'd lost. But then I'd remind myself, she did this, not me. With the shop settled and Jason out of a job, I thought I'd reached the peak of my revenge. But life has a funny way of delivering opportunities when you least expect them. I was sorting through some old files in my home office one evening when I came across a folder labeled Loan Agreement. It was a document we'd signed together when starting the coffee shop. An agreement that clearly outlined how Ashley had used me as a guarantor for a significant portion of the shop's initial funding. It hit me like a lightning bolt. If Ashley defaulted on her new loan to buy me out, I'd technically be responsible for covering it. She probably hadn't even thought about that detail in her desperation to keep the shop. I called my lawyer the next morning to ask about my options. "Well," she said thoughtfully, "you could formally withdraw as a guarantor. It would force the bank to reassess the loan, and Ashley might lose her financing. But it would also mean forfeiting the money from the buyout." I sat in silence for a moment, weighing the cost against the satisfaction of watching Ashley's final safety net collapse. "Do it," I said. The fallout came quickly. Less than 2 weeks later, Ashley called me in a panic. "Mark," she started, her voice shaky. "The bank's saying the loan's under review. They're asking for more collateral." "What the hell did you do?" I didn't bother hiding my satisfaction. "I withdrew as your guarantor," I said simply. You can't do that," she shrieked. "I can, and I did," I replied calmly. "Maybe you should have read the fine print before you signed the paperwork." "Mark, this will ruin me," she cried. "Sounds familiar," I said, hanging up without another word. Sure enough, the bank retracted her loan approval, leaving Ashley with no way to pay me out. The shop was put on the market almost immediately, and within a month, it was sold to a couple who had been eyeing the location for their own cafe concept. Watching Ashley hand over the keys to the shop she had poured so much into was a moment I'll never forget. Her fiery confidence was gone, replaced by a defeated woman who'd finally been forced to reckon with her own choices. But there was still one loose end, Jason. As it turned out, Catherine wasn't done with him either. She had filed for divorce and was going after him for full custody of their kids, armed with all the evidence I'd shared. Jason's financial situation was already in shambles after losing his job, and Catherine wasn't holding back. One evening, she called me to share the news. "Jason's moved back in with his parents," she said, laughing dryly. "He's completely broke. Serves him right. Couldn't happen to a nicer guy," I said with a smirk. With both Ashley and Jason's lives in tatters, I finally felt like I could breathe again. I wasn't proud of everything I'd done, but I didn't regret it either. They had made their choices, and I had simply ensured they faced the consequences. It wasn't about being petty or vindictive. It was about reclaiming my power, my dignity, and my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free. With Ashley out of my life and the coffee shop sold, I was finally free to focus on what mattered most, myself and my future. At first, it felt strange. like stepping into a world I didn't recognize. For years, my life had revolved around Ashley and the shop. Now, there was this empty space and I wasn't sure how to fill it. But slowly, piece by piece, I started rebuilding. The first step was finding a new job. I'd poured so much of my energy into the coffee shop that I hadn't thought about what I'd do if it ever went under. Luckily, I still had connections from my previous career in marketing, and within a month, I landed a role with a small startup. It was fast-paced and demanding, but it felt good to be challenged again. Next, I worked on my home. The house had always felt like our space, filled with memories of Ashley and our life together. I wanted to reclaim it, so I started redecorating, painting the walls, replacing old furniture, and getting rid of anything that reminded me of her. I also took time to focus on myself. Therapy was a game changer. My therapist helped me unpack the anger and sadness I'd been carrying, reminding me that while revenge had its place, true healing came from letting go. The kids were a big part of my healing process, too. They were young enough not to fully understand what had happened, but old enough to sense the changes. I made sure to prioritize them, spending more time at the park, helping with homework, and even starting a weekly movie night tradition. Emma, my oldest, surprised me one evening as I was tucking her in. "Daddy," she said, her little voice hesitant. "Are you happy now?" The question caught me off guard. "Why do you ask, sweetheart?" She shrugged. "You seem different, like you smile more." I felt a lump in my throat. "Yeah, Emma, I think I am happier now." One day, I got a text from Catherine. "Jason's officially out of the picture. Full custody is finalized. How are things on your end?" I smiled as I typed back, "Life's good. Finally moving on." She responded with a thumbs-up emoji and a simple message. "You deserve it." As months turned into a year, I started to realize that my life was better without Ashley. Sure, there were moments of loneliness and regret, but they were outweighed by the peace I felt knowing I was no longer living in a web of lies. I even started dating again. Nothing serious at first, just casual coffee dates and dinners, but it felt good to put myself out there. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my own happiness. If there's one thing I've learned through all of this, it's that betrayal doesn't have to define you. It can break you, yes, but it can also be a catalyst for growth. Ashley's actions forced me to confront my own values, my boundaries, and what I truly wanted out of life. And while I wouldn't wish what I went through on anyone, I'm grateful for where it led me. Because in the end, I found something I thought I'd lost forever, myself. Life was finally settling into a rhythm. The kids were thriving, my career was back on track, and I was starting to feel like myself again. I hadn't thought about Ashley in weeks, until I ran into her unexpectedly one afternoon. It happened at the grocery store of all places. I was grabbing some snacks for Emma and Ethan's movie night when I spotted her in the produce aisle. She looked different. Her once perfectly styled hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore an oversized hoodie that swallowed her frame. For a moment, I considered turning around and pretending I hadn't seen her. But then she spotted me. "Mark," she said, her voice hesitant. "Ashley," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. How are you?" she asked, fiddling with a loose thread on her sleeve. "I'm good," I said honestly. "The kids are great. Work's going well." She nodded, her gaze dropping to the floor. "That's good."
I'm glad.
There was an awkward silence before she finally spoke again. "I heard about the new owners at the shop. They've really changed the place." "I wouldn't know," I said with a shrug. "I haven't been back." Her face fell, and for a split second, I felt a pang of sympathy. But then I reminded myself of everything she'd done, and the feeling evaporated. "Well," she said, clearing her throat, "I guess I'll see you around." "Take care, Ashley," I said, walking away without looking back. That encounter stuck with me, not because I still had feelings for her, but because it reminded me how far I'd come. Seeing Ashley like that, a shadow of the confident woman I once knew, made me realize just how much her choices had cost her. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It wasn't about who won or lost. It was about moving forward, and I was doing just that. Later that night, As the kids and I curled up on the couch for movie night, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. Gratitude for the life I was rebuilding, for the strength I'd found, and for the lessons I'd learned. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. But then, the unexpected happened. A week later, I received a letter in the mail from Ashley. It was handwritten, the envelope sealed with a faint trace of her perfume, a scent I hadn't smelled in over a year. I debated throwing it away, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside was a single page, her handwriting shaky but deliberate. Mark, I don't expect forgiveness, and I know I don't deserve it. But I wanted to tell you how sorry I am. For everything. Losing you and the kids was the worst thing that ever happened to me, and it's all my fault. I know I'll never make it right, but I hope someday you'll remember the good times we had and know that, in my own messed up way, I did love you. I hope you find happiness, because you deserve it more than anyone I've ever known. Ashley. I sat there for a long time, staring at the letter. Part of me wanted to rip it up, to reject her apology outright. But another part of me, the part that had learned to let go, felt closure. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer. I didn't need her apology, but I appreciated it nonetheless. I wasn't living for Ashley's regrets anymore. I was living for me. After reading Ashley's letter, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Closure, yes, but also an odd sense of finality. For years, our relationship had defined so much of my life, from the highs of our early days to the crushing betrayal that tore us apart. But now it was truly over. I could let go. The next few months were transformative. I threw myself fully into my work and parenting. The kids and I developed new traditions, Saturday morning pancakes, family game nights, and road trips to explore hiking trails nearby. Watching Emma and Ethan laugh and thrive reminded me of what mattered most. I also started dating more seriously. After months of casual meetups, I met someone, Claire. She was kind, funny, and down-to-earth, with no pretense or hidden agenda. We took things slow, which felt right. For the first time in years, I felt like I could open my heart again without fear. One day, as Claire and I were walking in the park with the kids, Emma tugged at my hand. "Daddy," she said, looking up at me with a big grin. "You seem really happy." I smiled down at her. "That's because I am, sweetheart." A year later, I stood at the edge of a familiar street, the one where Ashley and I had built the coffee shop. It had been completely revamped by the new owners, with bright yellow awnings and a quirky new name, Sunny Bean Cafe. I stepped inside, curiosity getting the better of me. The place was buzzing with customers, the smell of fresh coffee and baked goods filling the air. A barista greeted me warmly. "First time here?" "Not exactly," I said with a small smile. I ordered a coffee and sat by the window, watching the world go by. It felt surreal to be back in a place that had once been such a huge part of my life, now transformed into something unrecognizable. But instead of feeling sadness or regret, I felt at peace. Life moves on. People change. Buildings get repainted. That night, as I tucked the kids into bed, Emma asked, "Daddy, do you ever miss Mommy?" Her question caught me off guard, but I answered honestly. "Sometimes I miss the good times we had, but I think Mommy and I are both happier now, even if we're not together anymore." Emma seemed satisfied with that, curling up under her blanket. Before I turned out the light, I glanced at the drawer where Ashley's letter was tucked away. I hadn't read it again, and I didn't need to. Its purpose had been served. As I turned off the light and closed the door, I realized I wasn't just closing a chapter of my life. I was starting a new one. This time, it was my story written on my terms. Thank you for staying with me. This crazy journey is finally over, and I'm ready for what's next. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more interesting stories. And leave a comment with what you would do in this situation. See you in the next videos.